All right, YouTube friends. I was listening Larken Rose, a person I like. Some of you may be familiar with Larken Rose. He posted a video talking about the state of affairs from his sort of anarchist. He calls himself anarchist. I think anarchism has gotten a bad rap. It basically means individual responsibility. Fundamentally, that's how I interpret it, and I think he's pretty much on board. I really like this guy. The way he comes out and expresses his views quite simply, and it the same way that I vibrate to people that fundamentally understand what our circumstance or what our deteriorating circumstances may be connected to the lack of individual conscience. And I think that no one would really argue this, that this aspect to us that propels us forward in a sense to do the right thing, that we wake up in the morning and we have choices and we can choose from macro to micro level to either do the wrong thing or the right thing. And when we get it wrong, part of our nature is to try and make things right again. So Larken Rose to me represents this aspect. He has his own version of it. He calls himself an anarchist. But it fundamentally confirms the idea, to me anyway, it makes sense what he says, that individual responsibility trumps every other version of responsibility, meaning the statism that he is against. The idea that there's the nanny state who's going to take care of business for you. I mean, we see how that works, right? The nanny state, the dreaded nuclear red, scourging through our China shop, the radiation, the toxicities, and that's just the most egregious offense by the state to have instituted a program that fundamentally destroys all life on Earth with their technology. The idea that the mind, the intellect, is so brilliant it can't do anything wrong. This is the idea of science too, that science believes itself to be so perfect that the scientific method is so perfect. If it was used, I suppose, you know, that questioning, that fundamental curiosity, if it was actually in place in the scientific method, if it was implemented, that would be a great idea. That would actually work possibly. But I'm not on board of the whole intellect, science, rationality, that kind of movement, that kind of thrust within humanity is secondary to this other element within us that is about truly caring of circumstances in our own lives and other people's lives. It's like to be able to get along with people, even though they may not appeal to us necessarily, but we still have a fundamental cooperative nature within us. This is, I think, what Larken Rose is addressing, talking a lot about, which why he makes sense. And he has exposed people like Mahmoudieh and other people who have capitulated to the idea that there is a superstructure above us that is more important than the individual. And I think this is where Mahmoudieh's case fundamentally collapsed, because he was promoting, after at first he, like Rose even points this out too, I'm in total agreement that Mahmoudieh had sort of fundamental personal perspectives and a worldview that came out of an inner urgency, but that was transformed into some kind of imposed idea, something that came from outside of him, not from within. Well, I sort of say from within because there's somebody at the door. Hold on. Pause. No visitor, just door noise from the wind and the flock of pigeons in our roof up here. The owners are not interested in blocking the pigeons from entering. They don't seem to care about what they do up in the roof. They're quite noisy. Things fall down onto the ceiling sometimes. Anyway, the Larken Rose thing that I was listening to really was quite inspirational to me. I felt I always feel his sincerity, which is something that is important to me. When I talk about things, my emphasis is primarily on elements that inspire. I'm not denying the fact that an idea, that a thought, that someone saying a sentence could be inspirational, but it's way down the line, which is why the music I played and the short video before this one that I did on the Bulgarian voices, the women singing, what is transmitted in this music, and it was quite a specific feeling that this music evoked in me. It's extremely sad. I mean, there is a kind of lament, the lament of something that never came to fruition, that never happened. But in that lament, we find courage and hope. We see ourselves, we see a way out. In understanding that which we miss, we begin to feel more appreciative of that which we have. So this is, I mean, that's the first level of response that I had to this music, which is not an intellectual phenomenon. It's a feeling. It's a connection to what you might agree to call the spirit within us that is independent of thought. It actually supersedes thought. These things come towards us like an image, a painting, a color, a vibration. These are things that are potentially very inspirational. Now what I just like to comment on is the beer virus. The beer virus, I mean, we're fundamentally, I mean, I've got my dreaded red nuclear, this should be the true color, not the yellow and black, but the red and black, because red and black, the Baphomet, the evil one, is much more accurate in the logo. This should be the icon, the nuclear icon, but they wanted to impress us with a beautiful color that is yellow. I mean, red is a beautiful color too. It's just our associations are kind of mixed up in us. You see, this is how it works. This is how Bernays, the guy that instructed Goebbels on how to win over public opinion, this is what he instructed Goebbels to do in order to, you get at people by undermining thought. In essence, you appeal to people's vulnerabilities, and their vulnerability starts on a level of experience that has nothing to do with thinking. So likewise, we have that opportunity. As if you're a creative person, you have an opportunity, and I'm talking creative person because I make paintings. I'm a painter, an artist. So I'm quite interested in this phenomenon of being able to seduce people into a way of being, a way of acting that is going to improve our lives. And improvement of lives, there isn't a specific thing I have in mind. It's just making a person begins to feel better about themselves and how they relate to the world around them. And this sensibility, and I'm going to keep referring back to Larken Rose on something. I should come to the point what I really like. He feels very hopeful. The circumstances in terms of the beer virus, that a substantial number of people are refusing to accept the company line. Now, this has been going on a long time. It's not the first time this has happened, but it is potentially going to unfold in a much larger context with a lot more people. Like here in Canada, we have a protest movement beginning that calls itself The Line, a noble bunch of people, and certain individuals associated with this movement. I consider myself to be part of the Line movement, the conscientious objectors to the government overreaches, the municipal, provincial, federal overreach in terms of ordinances and mandates that make absolutely no sense. And this is what Larken Rose was saying, because this is so egregious. The intellect, the mind kicks in when you're told here in Canada almost 11,000 people died of the beer virus, and uh, other than about 170 or so were people in old age homes and in circumstances where they were likely dying of other things anyway. So you basically have less than 200 people officially that died from the beer virus. This is a statistic in Canada. I think the 10,000 referred to all of Canada, or 11,000. So you have the news reporter, this was on CTV, reporting this discrepancy of 11,000 dead, and other than 200 were older people that were what they call comorbidity. So the mind kicks in for a lot of people. I say a lot, relatively few people allow their intellect, their reasoning to kick in and say, well, there's something wrong with this picture to have a lockdown. The extent to which these mandates are implemented on a very small number of, even if I personally don't believe this is anything other than a natural cycle of dying, but to call death a pandemic now starts not to make sense to a lot of people. This is Larken Rose's point, that there is hope in this, because for the first time, it is so obvious. The overstep is so obvious by the tyrannies that people pretend because we have a decent life, we live in a house, we can go shopping and spend our money, that we're on the winning team. So as long as that concept is propagated, the state has a lot of investment in people feeling they're on the winning team. It's like rah, 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 the patriot shit and all that going on is the winning team format, where the other side is a loser and you're a winner. So as long as you feel you're on the winning side, you're going to go along with stuff. This is just the nature of the beast, the communal herd, the herd going along with the idea that as a herd, we're the winners. And if we're not, we're going to become winners or something. So the point is, in the way I approach things with this this piece of music I played to the backdrop of a painting, actually 3 paintings that morphed, that changed. It represents for me the possibility that we have to change. And this is crucial. And I think what's really important, what I've been stressing, what I've been saying, what I've understood, is that we can't change anybody, especially with words. The only thing is, through some kind of inspiration, through some sort of sense of, oh, I'd like to be like that person, or we see somebody act a certain way, and then we say to her, oh, it's not like they're icons, I want to be like George Clooney. No, it's like, I want to be a person of conscience too. I see somebody act the right way, to stand up for the vulnerable, to see this exhibited. I may be a bit hesitant or afraid, and then I see someone step out and do a certain thing that is so noble in their action. This is inspirational. Now, it's not only in terms of an action, although that is phenomenal, that if a person steps in between somebody who is vulnerable and protects them, that is like fucking A. I'm saying also we can practice this on a day-to-day level through becoming aware of the potential within ourselves to change and exhibit that in some form, like I do with my paintings. I think there is an underlying sensibility within me that has accepted art isn't just an aesthetic or decorative activity. It has something much more profound in terms of how things work in this experience, in this totality, how things may even extend into another dimension, what I like to call eternity. I have a romance with eternity. My art is an expression of the romance I have with eternity in many different ways. So my last video is a pre-response to that hopeful thing I have that Larken Rose is talking about now. the fact that the bastards have overreached to the extent that they have, and the transgressions are so clear, they're so obvious to the people that are thoughtful, especially the people that are practicing acting on their conscience to do the right thing. This is a very promising state of affairs that we're in. That's what I'm saying. That's why I posted that last video, the Bulgarian voices, which are just so moving. I mean, we can find this in many different ways. And the invocation of high-minded ideas like consciousness. I'm just going to spend a minute on this idea of consciousness and all the swamis and gurus that have attracted us with their ideas on consciousnness. And they represent quite often Maharshi, Yogi, or Krishnamurti, the UD and JD, and all these swamis, the Brahmins that have come forward to express within their own appearance, like the, what is that Bubba guy who coughed up golden eggs, this fraud. He impresses people by looking a certain way. People have associations with enlightenment in terms of how it should look or how it might look. Make no mistake, this is quite manipulated. This idea of our spirit can easily be manipulated. So I'm referring to someone like Matt from Quantum of Conscience, who I listen to because he has quite an elegant insight into how things are not how they appear to be, but then they kind of shift into this notion that consciousness, which is everything, by the way. It's impossible to talk about consciousness really in any reasonable way. It's kind of like the fish swimming through water and telling the fish you're swimming in water. This is fundamentally a symbol that, or an analogy that I could give to describe consciousness. You're swimming in the water, but you don't know you're swimming in the water. And how can you identify this? You might say the fish sticks his nose out and says, that's not water, that's something else. So you can only say it's something else, but you don't know what it is. And I find that to be the encompassing notion of consciousness. So if somebody comes out, like these two people I just mentioned, and try to analyze the world in terms of consciousness, it's going to fail. It's a built-in fail mechanism. The idea that we can articulate through words what it is that we are a part of, this mystery. And science is quite perplexed by consciousness. It's part of the equation that really throws them off the edge. They get very frustrated by this. They keep coming back to it. All the great scientific thought thinkers say, well, how do we explain consciousness in all our lab experiments? How does this work? Well, they say the observed and the observer affect each other. It's like just by watching, you affect what you're watching. It's a curious phenomenon too. You could go into this. I'm rambling a little because this inspiration that I got out of Larken Rose, I focus on the people I'm exposed to that makes sense. Not just here, but they make sense there. That they don't translate what happens inside into a bunch of gobbledygook, Swami-ish enlightenment. This is a pitfall. We need to stay, even if they use all the right words of being grounded in the now and all of, what the fuck does that mean? Grounded in the now. Give me your example of grounded in the now. Yeah, just think, what does it mean to be grounded in the now? Da, 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 da. What I say, fundamentally, is to be in that sweet spot where you're doing the right thing. Whether it's the food you eat, the conversation you have, the children you bring up in a big, that's important. How you're always in that sweet spot, and when you're not, you try to get into it. That is the now. to be in that sweet spot. The now, being a reptile and a bastard, means nothing. All right, so you've identified that you're a shithead. What's the point of that? There's a lot of that going around. Let's kind of understand and put into words how this actually might be applied to day-to-day life. And without inspiration, there is no hope. That's what I say. Without inspiration, there is no hope. And how do we get inspired? I get inspired by listening to these Bulgar, these women with curious voices. I mean, those high-pitched voices. But there is a transcendence. There is a sense of transcending, this feeling in our nature to want to be more than we are. This transcendent feeling must be evoked at every moment and every day as much as possible in the most insignificant activities. And I could spend time analyzing our circumstances and feel self-gratification, but to what end? So my message, my thought, my YouTube stuff has always been predicated on articulating an infrastructure of self, referring to it clumsily as inner world and outer world. It's a clumsy reference. It's again attempting to articulate the nature of the mystery that we're in through words that indicate opposition, inner, outer. It's difficult. It's like these opposing things. It's kind of like contrast in a painting. Without contrast, you have a minimalist work. You have like a Rothko or, well, no, it's like Agnes Martin or people like Ellsworth Kelly. There is a degree of eliminating all, or Malevich, the fundamental minimalist, Malevich in the 1907, the supremacist paintings that he did, which were basically white on white. So if you eliminate all contrast, if you're totally enlightened, it makes a lot of sense. But essentially, it's again a metaphor. We have to deal with our circumstances in terms of what we're given. I'm given pigments, I'm given certain basics that I try to use in order to propagate some sort of way of creating this feeling within us that we can be inspired and reach for something. This is fundamental to our nature. We're always looking for that next level of succeeding toward. I feel like being better people. We're not Aleister Crowley. Fuck you. Whatever I can get away with, whatever I can indulge in, whatever I can feel makes me. My sensibility is like stuck at what I physically smell, touch, taste. This is where I'm stuck. Well, there is another level of consciousness that can be explored. And I guess, yeah, I'll leave it here. So I'll put a link to the Larken Rose video that I really felt. He analyzed our circumstances, but also created a sense of, understood there to be a level of hope because the overreach has now affected people that were dormant in their basements, were secluded away in their winning team feeling, and they're no longer going to just acquiesce to the rules from handed down from Mount Olympus. So this is a very hopeful, it's a very hopeful conclusion, and I agree with him. I agree with him. This is a potential. This beer virus has set up a potential radical shift away from that statism, nanny state, total control tyranny that we've been in. I mean, they give us certain abilities to, or they give us something that makes us feel like we're free to do what we want. Now we can shop online and go to Walmart, Costco, or Amazon. This is the choices that are left to us, and people are finally figuring out that's not a good choice. I don't think so.